Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ask a Property Manager, episode number 9. Today's February 26, 2020. Coming to you live from the Own Buffalo studios here in Buffalo, New York. I'm Andrew Schultz, principal broker of Own Buffalo, Inc. On today's show, we're going to be discussing some of my favorite lease clauses, as well as the 5 questions I ask when I pre-screen someone before I show them an apartment. So we're going to jump right into it. Wouldn't be a proper show if we didn't plug our social media before we got into it. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager come out every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on Facebook. You can also catch these the same day every Wednesday. They go live on YouTube as well, but the live version is actually on Facebook. So if you wanted to ask a question live while we're on the air, you'd have to do that on Facebook, facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. If you're feeling generous, head on over to our website, ownbuffalo.com. Click on the link for our YouTube page and hit the subscribe button. We're trying to get to that magic 100 subscribers mark so that we can get our custom URL over there. And as always, you can grab a free consultation with me just by going to our website at ownbuffalo.com and clicking on the link for the free consult. This week's consults are booked up, but there are a couple set up for next week. So we're going to be discussing first some different lease clauses that we have in place here at our company. And I'm not going to sit and read them all to you, but I will at least show you some of our lease clauses, and you can pause them if you want to sit and read the entire thing. But I want to express why I put these in the lease, why I think that they're important to have. First one we're going to talk about is appliances and add-ons. This is one that seems to be overlooked in a lot of the generic leases out there. What appliances are included with the home, what appliances are not included with the home, things of that nature. It should be pretty straightforward to say if you have a refrigerator in the apartment when you show it, that person's probably going to expect a refrigerator to be there when they rent it, the same refrigerator that they saw when they were there. There's always a lot of discussion on if a refrigerator has an ice maker or a water dispenser in the door. If that breaks during the tenancy, do you have to fix it? I'm of the opinion that, yeah, if it was rented with that working, then it should be repaired as part of the tenancy. Pretty straightforward. I mean, if you rent something to someone and that thing breaks through no fault of the rentee, the tenant, why should it be their responsibility to fix that? So take care of your appliances. It never hurts to have, I guess I'll throw this one out there too. It never hurts to have a small refrigerator. We have a lot of doors. We're managing about 100 apartments at this point. If you have enough units to justify having a small fridge or something like that in case one of your refrigerators goes down, that's a good way to show good faith towards the tenant when a fridge goes bad if you can't get a new one or can't get an appliance repair technician out right away. If you have a fridge that you can at least move over to their place so they can try to keep some of their stuff cold in the meantime, that always gets you a little bit of an extra bonus point with the tenants. So that's my tip of the day, is if you're able to get some sort of a small refrigerator to help tenants out in a pinch, they might not be able to take care of all of their stuff, but hopefully they don't lose everything. So one thing about this lease clause is that it also discusses the appliances not specifically listed. For instance, a washer and dryer are not specifically listed in this lease clause. We typically don't include washers and dryers with our apartments, but some of them do have a washer and dryer that was left by a property owner or something like that. We basically consider those appliances as is, where is. They're not something that the landlord is going to maintain. They're simply provided so that somebody has the opportunity to use them. Going along with that first one, removal of landlord's property. This is one of those lease clauses that was added into our lease by necessity. And it still boils my blood a little bit to think about it. We had done a really nice rehab on a rental property in South Buffalo and went the extra mile and put in a stainless steel stove and refrigerator when we were finished updating the unit. So we rent the unit out. The tenant's in there for about 6 months, and eventually it winds up leading to an eviction. And on eviction day, we show up at the property. It's us, it's the city marshal service, and the tenant is long gone. So we walk through the apartment, and I notice, hey, my appliances are gone. They took the refrigerator outright, didn't bring a new fridge back, but they were kind enough to bring us a busted electric stove to replace our stainless steel gas stove that we had put in the unit. So When you're doing your move-in inspections, always make sure that you get interior and exterior photos of the appliances, including the little tag that's got the make, model, and serial on it. That would have gone a long way in helping us try to recover that stuff. Not necessarily get the items back, but at least be able to go back to the previous tenant and include that as part of the damages. So that was a lesson learned for us. Definitely have something in your lease that states that the tenant cannot remove property of the landlord from the home. Plumbing, electric, smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, furnace. This is a little bit longer, but I highlighted a couple of the key points here. Tenant is not to put debris, grease, paper towels, Q-tips, tampons, newspaper, food, any other materials down sinks or drains. Tenant agrees to pay the entire amount on bills for all sewer cleaning services resulting from clogged pipes and sewer backup. That is important for when you have tenants that are creating these headaches, that you have some kind of a clause in your lease that allows you to bill that charge back to the tenant, because it is a tenant responsible item and they should be paying for that. So that's something to keep in mind. Make sure that if you don't have that in your lease, that might be something that you want to add, even something along the lines of just a generic tenant caused damages clause, allowing you to charge things back to the tenant if it's damage that they caused beyond reasonable wear and tear. Let's get that out there, beyond reasonable wear and tear. This clause also talks about not overloading electrical outlets. Only 2 electrical operated items may be plugged into an electrical receptacle. When we do our inspections, we do check for this. What we're really checking for is we want to make sure that a tenant doesn't have one power strip plugged into another power strip, plugged into another power strip, and creating kind of that daisy chain effect. That's a real easy way to overload an outlet and start an electrical fire. So that's the kind of thing that we typically look for when we're doing our inspections, just to make sure that tenants are remaining compliant and not trying to burn the houses down. Always a nice thing to have happen. Apartment has a smoke and carbon monoxide detector, working condition. If it's battery operated, tenant agrees at their own expense to replace the battery. If it stops working, call us. We'll come out and replace it for free. That's a clause in our lease. That being said, when we go in and do our furnace checkups and boiler checkups at the beginning of winter, we always make sure to check all of the smoke and CO detectors to ensure that they are in place and working and that we remain code compliant. And that means in our state, in New York, we have to have a smoke detector inside every bedroom. Then you have to have a smoke detector and a CO detector within, it's either 10 or 15 feet of the outside of the door. I'd have to look at the exact code to bring that up. They also want a minimum of 1 smoke and CO detector per floor, including attics and basements. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you have an attic or a basement, you're going to have to do something to protect those areas with smoke and CO detectors as well. New York State also now requires all new smoke and CO detectors that are going in to be a 10-year battery, as opposed to just a standard 9-volt that you would have to swap out every 6 months, every 6 months when the times change. So that's something to keep in mind, and I think more and more states are moving towards that 10-year smoke detector thing. So keep that in mind. Apartment has a furnace in working condition. I'm just going to read the highlighted section here. If the furnace is high efficiency or side venting, meaning it's venting out the side wall of the home, tenant is responsible for keeping objects, snow, and debris free from the air intake and vent areas. A buildup of snow, debris, or objects can lead to the furnace producing carbon monoxide, a colorless, odorless gas which can be fatal. Super, super important that if your tenants are responsible for snow removal, you're going to want to show them, okay, this is the air intake and the vent for your furnace. You're going to want to make sure that this stays clear of snow. And it's worth noting we're in Buffalo. I'm pretty sure you guys have figured out we're in a cold weather climate up here. This might not apply if you live in Florida or California or something like that. But that buildup of snow and ice around the air intake and especially the exhaust vent, that can lead to a buildup of carbon monoxide in the apartment, which is something you obviously want to try to avoid whenever possible. So making sure tenants know where those are and that they have to keep them clean during a snowstorm is super important. We had an issue a couple years back when we had a large snowstorm. It was like 7 foot of snow. The tenants did not know about this side vent furnace, and their furnace stopped working. So I had to explain to them over the phone, okay, you have a side vent furnace. Fortunately, the furnace shut down and didn't just start pumping carbon monoxide into the house, but most newer furnaces do have that kind of a safety cutoff there. If they know that there's no flow going out through the vent, they will shut things down. Fortunately, we were kind of able to walk her through over the phone how to clear everything out and get her heat back up and running. So Super important that tenants understand that. It's not usually as big of a deal in a chimney situation because everything is venting all the way up through the roof line. But on these side vents, sometimes it can be a concern. So definitely keep watch of that. Make sure that your tenants are aware of it. Lock and lockout policy. So we put this in place. This is, again, another one that came from a necessity. I had a tenant that called me on a holiday and was locked out of their apartment. I had to drive from, I had to put like 3 hours worth of driving in to get from where I was to where the keys were to the tenant and then back to where I was going, all on a holiday. And because there was no clause in there, the tenant basically got that lockout for free. So essentially what we did was added a lockout clause, basically stating that if we have to come and let you into your apartment, there is a charge for that. And it's not like the tenant has to call us. They could just as easily call a locksmith. We purposely set our rates on this to be cheaper than what a locksmith would be to come out and unlock an apartment because we don't want tenants to have to cause damage to get into the unit or whatever the case may be. But obviously, if we have to pull somebody out of the office or pull somebody off of a maintenance job to go and unlock a tenant's door, that's something that we do need to plan for. The one thing I did highlight here, these fees are due at the time the landlord responds for the lockout or lock replacement. That is one of those things that we used to just add it to a tenant's ledger and they would just never want to pay it and it would turn into an argument. So now that payment is due when we arrive on location before we unlock the door. Tenants hate it. But if they called a locksmith, they would have to pay the locksmith right then and there as well. And we're set up so that if they want to swipe a credit or a debit card or whatever, they can do that. They can hand us cash, whatever the case may be. Definitely worth having that clause in your lease. This clause also specifically states that no additional locks will be installed on any door without the permission of the landlord. We have a specialized lock type that we use. We're going to talk about that in next week's episode, actually. We have a specialized lock that we like to use on as many of our buildings as possible. And if a tenant changes out that lock without our knowledge, number one, it prevents us from having access to the home, which is our primary concern. And number two, it creates a bit of an animosity issue between the tenant and the landlord. So we just try to avoid that. Avoid that whenever possible. Maintenance of lawns and snow removal. And again, this is a cold weather climate clause. And some of this won't matter. If you have like apartment complexes and things like that where the landlord is going to take care of the lawn, the landlord is going to take care of the snow. Never hurts to have this in there just to make sure that everyone's on the same page as to who's taking care of that stuff. We rent predominantly single families, duplexes, triplexes, and quads. And in those instances, especially the singles and the duplexes, typically the tenants are going to be responsible for that snow removal, making sure that the sidewalk and steps are clear. But we take care of the lawns on all of our properties. We have a service that takes care of that during the summer months. So it's good to make sure that it's spelled out exactly who's responsible for the lawns and the snow removal. And it does specify in here, needs to be removed from sidewalks anytime there's 3 inches or more of accumulation. Tenants are responsible for keeping stairs clear of snow at all times, no matter how much accumulation. Rock salt should be used as necessary. If a tenant calls you and says, hey, can we get a shovel and some rock salt? Just give it to them. You're going to spend $20 to make your life infinitely easier. You're going to get a tenant that's willing to take care of the stuff. I've seen landlords before squabble over, well, it's a tenant's responsibility. They should supply the shovel and the rock salt. Give them a shovel and some rock salt. It's not the end of the world. Utilities. This is a big one. Couple things that I want to make sure that we're covering in this. There's a few things that I specify in here. The first thing is tenant will be responsible for payment of the following bills, and it lists out the various utilities that they may be responsible for here in the Western New York market. Tenant specifically authorizes landlord to deduct amounts of unpaid bills from their security deposit in the event they remain unpaid after the termination of this agreement. So this is in there to make sure that we have a go back, so that we can go back and charge against the tenant's security deposit if they leave us with unpaid utility bills when they move out. In Western New York, typically, the utilities would be in the name of the tenant, so more often than not, this is never an issue. However, we have had situations where a tenant has moved out and we've had to turn utilities on to prevent pipe freezes or something like that. That would get back billed to the tenant if they're still inside of their tenancy. Like if they're just abandoning the apartment, that would go back towards the tenant's deposit. If tenant wishes to have any service installed that requires drilling through the walls of the property, landlord must be contacted 48 hours ahead of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At no time may any holes be made in the roof of the property for any reason. This is a big issue with satellite dish installers in our area. They basically will show up and throw a satellite dish wherever they think they can throw one. On tenanted properties, they're supposed to ask for a signed letter from the property owner authorizing the installation of the dish, as well as where the dish is supposed to be installed. Most of them don't do it. More often than not, the tenants will have a satellite dish installed before you even know that it was there. Now you've got holes in your roof or something like that. This clause makes the tenant aware that they're responsible for any damages caused by their satellite dish install or even their cable install, drilling through walls for a cable install and things like that. There's a lot of damage that can be caused by, utility guys that don't know what they're doing and what have you. So, it makes sense to make sure that if you can specify to the tenant how you want something run and where you want it installed, you're going to be much better off in the long run. If you have to try to go back after one of these installation companies for damages, you might get lucky and get something out of them, but I've had very little success in pursuing them. I haven't taken them to court or anything, but just how much are you going to argue with them for in court? Is it really worth it? Here's one that I see people missing all the time. Tenant agrees to turn on utilities as specified above as of the commencement of the lease and provide the utility company or landlord with any necessary meter readings. The important part of this is turn on utilities as specified above as of the commencement of the lease. We'll go ahead and highlight that for you. So our National Grid and National Fuel, which are our electric and gas providers, we call them the morning of a move-in to ensure that the tenants have switched the utilities over into their name. If the tenants haven't switched the utilities over into their name, they don't move in. It's that simple. They have to have the utilities established prior to move-in. This eliminates all of the back and forth of, well, the tenant moved in but never switched the utilities over, and I have 3 months of back bill and blah, blah, blah. If you make sure that the tenant has taken care of the utilities before they have a chance to move into the property, you never have to worry about dealing with those back bill issues down the road. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. I think most utility companies, as long as you can provide a name, they should be able to tell you whether or not the utility has been switched over, or if there's an order in to switch the utility over, or what have you. So those are the lease clauses that I wanted to cover today. Hopefully you guys got a little bit of information out of that. As I said, if you want to sit and read the actual lease clause, you can go back and pause the video and look at the exact language, tweak it for whatever your needs may be, etc., etc., etc. So I want to move on now to talking about, before we even get to the lease, maybe I should have reversed these in the discussion, but before we even get to the point where we're signing a lease, you have to find a tenant. And part of that is pre-screening tenants or prospective tenants that call and want to come out to take a look at the property. So we have a very simple set of 5 questions that we ask when we're pre-screening tenants. We did it this way on purpose, and I'll explain as we're going through. So our 5 pre-screening questions are, when are you looking to move? If you're looking to move in July and I have a vacancy, now, that's not going to work. I'm not going to hold an apartment until July, so it's good to know when the people are looking to move. How many people will be living in the home? And it's specifically asked as how many people because of fair housing law. We ask how many people as opposed to how many adults and how many children. More often than not, when you're talking to somebody and you ask how many people will be living in the home, they usually volunteer the information. Oh, it'll be, myself, my wife, and 3 kids, or whatever the case may be. So that's usually they will volunteer that information. If they don't, just make a note of how many people they say are going to be living in the unit. Do you have any animals? And we ask animals as opposed to pets, because in theory, this should cover support animals as well as emotional support animals as well. Service animals as well as emotional support animals as well. That should give you, if they have pets or if they have an ESA or an SA that they need in their apartment, that should uncover it when you ask this question. So we ask animals as opposed to just pets. The reason we do that is because ESAs and SAs, service animals and emotional support animals, they're not considered a pet. They're considered durable medical equipment, just the same as a CPAP, just the same as a pair of crutches, something like that. That's why we ask this word, or we use the word animals as opposed to pets. If the question comes up, do you accept emotional support animals? Yes, you have to provide us with the proper documentation and your vet records and stuff like that. Then we refer it over to our attorney and they take a look at everything and we go from there. But that's how we ask that question to remain fair housing compliant, is do you have any animals? What is the combined monthly income for everyone living in the home? So this is going to help you determine whether or not they're going to be able to support the rent of the property. So if you have an apartment that's renting for $1,000 a month, our criteria is that you have to show a monthly income of $3,000 after taxes and deductions. So what we're looking to do here is add up, well, somebody will say, well, I make $2,200 a month. Somebody else will say, I make $1,500. You're basically adding everything together, along with any different voucher programs or assistances or things like that that they may have in place, trying to hit that magic number to try to qualify them for the apartment. That's what we're doing there, and we always kind of make a note as to what they say their income is. If they say that they have like a Section 8 voucher or something like that, we make a note of that as well so that we know, okay, this person's coming in, they've got their voucher, et cetera, et cetera. Just helps us to remember things about the lead before we come out and show them the actual apartment. And then what is your credit score? Very straightforward question, but you would be surprised at how many people have no idea or can't give you like a specific number or something like that. A lot of people will have kind of a range, but more often than not, the answer that we get is, oh, I've got great credit or I've got bad credit. A lot of people don't seem to know what their credit score is unless they're actively out buying something. We always run credit as part of our tenant selection criteria. We are looking for a credit score of 600, and I think that we're using a TransUnion score if I remember correctly. So we are looking for a credit score of 600. There are a couple of qualifiers in there as well, which we'll talk about in another episode when we talk about our screening process. But yeah, that's typically what we're looking for, is around a 600 credit score. That's really kind of a market dependent thing. I know some people who won't take below a 700 credit score, but they also are renting properties that are $5,000 plus a month. So, it's a little bit different market when you're talking about what we consider a luxury listing here in Buffalo versus a typical South Buffalo apartment renting somewhere in the $800 to $1,000 a month range. So that's pretty straightforward. Those are the pre-screening questions that we ask. We ask those same questions in that same format of everybody that calls us and asks about an apartment. We try to do this so that it keeps us compliant with regards to fair housing and a variety of other things. And the nice thing is we can always make notes on each lead when we talk to them, when we're putting them on the calendar. Okay, this person, I talked to them a couple of days ago. They're looking to move as soon as possible. They've got great income, great credit. It's, husband, wife, and 2 kids, whatever the case may be. Pretty straightforward. That's the criteria that we're using there in terms of our pre-screening questions. So that pretty much wraps things up for us here today. I would be remiss if I didn't drop back to our social media again and at least give that one more plug. I really do appreciate you guys watching. I love producing Ask a Property Manager. And the nice thing is you guys can really help us to improve this show. If you drop a comment or a question down below, we can answer. That question may wind up coming up in an upcoming episode of Ask a Property Manager. Also, whenever somebody drops a comment, the algorithms favor that stuff. It helps push the content up on news feeds and things like that. So if you enjoyed this content, or if I brought a little bit of value to your day, do me a favor, throw us a like, drop us a comment. It helps other people like you to see us as well. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. Subscribe to us on YouTube. You can go over to ownbuffalo.com, click on the link for YouTube, and hit the subscribe button. We're still trying to hit that 100 subscriber mark. Every subscription counts. So if you guys get any value out of this, I would really appreciate you just jumping over to YouTube and hitting that subscribe button. That would be great. As always, if you're looking to grab a free 30-minute phone consultation, you can do that over at Own Buffalo as well. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the ones for this week have actually booked up already, but I do have a couple open for next week. Speaking of next week, our next episode will be on March 4th at 10 a.m. Eastern, and the topic is going to be simplifying property management operations. So that'll be a good episode. Hope to see you guys next week, Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, right here for another episode of Ask a Property Manager. Thanks for watching and have a great day.